Our beloved Father, we are so pleased one more time to be here, gathering with the purpose of enhancing our knowledge, receiving more light that will make us feel happier by thinking that you always with us and your light is around us all the time. May we reflect this light to others, to our friends, to our family members, to our neighbors, as your Son Jesus Christ told us to do. Allow us, Father, to continue loving one another and spreading the good news of that we are created eternal. With that in mind, we ask your permission, Father, to open our Sunday meeting in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Thank you, Renato, for those lovely words and that prayer as well. We know how impactful prayer can be. And today we want to address a topic that's slightly different than we normally do. And that is because we see out there that the world is in a slightly different place than perhaps the one when we, which are a little bit older, grew up in. Things would be perhaps going not so great right now in different ways. And so it looks like the world's going bonkers. So why? Why is that happening, and what is it that we can do about it? It's something that we want to touch upon really quickly, just to have as a perspective, because we think that when we know the why and the how, it becomes easier for us to cope with the what and understand what is it that we can do to make this world become a better place. And to be frank with you, also be able to live through it in a way that brings us more joy, more happiness, more certainty, more love, right? So why is the world going bonkers? We're going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to try to find some tools of understanding, and we are going to consider some concepts that we already know, but we hope to stretch them just a little bit further based on some of the Spiritist literature that we have access to. And we're going to do it quickly, because that's what we do. And then we're going to meditate about it and reflect about it. All right, so we know that the world is full of war, violence, discrimination, and intolerance these days. And it's sort of apparent that this has led us to some sort of like hopelessness and apathy. We know that a lot of people are struggling to find out what is it that they want from life. They are changing jobs because they are not sure if that's what they want to do for themselves. And we also know that people are so dissatisfied with their lives that the number of attempted suicides are growing exponentially as well. And so even though we have all this wonderful progress that has allowed us to live comfortable lives in ways that we have never been able to do that in our entire human history, right? Today, for instance, we're sitting in this very nice room with electricity, climate-controlled, comfortable chairs, things that were never possible 100 years ago, right? So life should be better and we should be happier, yet it doesn't look like that. So why is that happening? So what is happening? Well, I think we all know what's happening, but we want to dive deeper, spiritually speaking, and understand the spiritual causes of all these things. So what we do know is that we are in a key moment of Earth's spiritual evolution. We know that in this particular moment seems like it's a very important time. This has been described, for instance, of those of us who like to read the Bible as the end of times. Perhaps you were familiar with the parable of the separation of the wheat and the tares. And in the Spiritist midst, we sometimes refer to as planetary transition. This is not the end of the world as sci-fi has imagined to be. The world will not blow up. We are not going to all die at once, right? But what is going to happen is we are nearing the end of an era in which we need to shift our perspective towards things. And so while it might find it interesting for us to kind of consider the sci-fi movies that tell us that the end of the world is here, this is not an end of physical world. It is an end of spiritual and emotional and moral world. It's the beginning of a happier one that's going to come. So it's an important phase. So that we know, right? But why is it happening right now? Why is it happening to us? Well, I think the idea here is easy. We're struggling to keep pace in our moral evolution. We have done all that advancement intellectually, which has brought us all the comforts that we are experiencing today. But I think we can see, given the world outside, that has made us a little bit self-centered and selfish, and that we are being very intolerant with each other. We're fighting with each other. We are not really at a moral pace that we should be at for the time that we have been. So when that happens, all these different challenges come to force us to reconsider that which is important to us from a moral and spiritual perspective. We have a pandemic, we have wars that call our attention to the need of doing things differently. So we need change. And that's because those who are lagging behind are slowing down the progress for those who are trying to make their way forward. It's not a difficult concept to explain, right? I think we all get it. If we are here in the group and the majority of this group is really not interested in learning and just doesn't pay attention, it becomes a little bit noisy, it will harm the learning of everybody else who is in the room. So if there is a high level of people who are not interested in learning, then that group will not move forward. And we're nearing that piece where people are just not as interested in progressing. So we need to kind of shake things up a little bit. Our spiritual benefactors do that so that we can wake up to the reality that we need to step up a little bit faster than we are before. Okay, so this is the moment that we're in. We're in this moment where it's important for us to move forward and make that effort as a whole, collectively speaking, right? So how will we do that? How will we move forward? And we're going to go quick through this, and we can always do questions later if we have time, right? Well, we are going to move forward through that which we already learned, reincarnation. We know through our studies that we are immortal beings that take on flesh every once in a while to do some lessons here, and then we return to our spiritual plane, which is our true nature. We learn there too, and we come back here again and do this again and get back there and reflect upon what we've done while we were here incarnate on earth, and what is it that we need to get back to and learn more of, and we do that over and over again. So reincarnation is a beautiful way of us continually learning and assessing what we're doing. We learn, we stop to reflect on it, we come back, we try again, we do take on new challenges. Those concepts are not new to those of us who have been exposed to Spiritism for a while. That explains why the world continues to evolve, because we continue to come back with more knowledge, more wisdom, and make things forward. But what I want to push us to think about, that's actually a complex mechanism of reincarnation taking place, and also spiritual migration. It's a little bit different. That is in place right now to help us move forward. What do you mean by that then? And how does that apply to the mess of this world, this bonkers world that's out there today? Well, let's use a illustration, shall we? It's not going to be the most beautiful. I don't know if it's showing over there, is it? Okay. I don't know if it's the most artistic illustration, and I call this the Great Spiritual Shuffle. What we already know is that we have incarnates, which are us who are living here on earth. We're spirits with a physical body. We also know that there are what we call discarnates, which are spirits in their spiritual sense, living around the earth, right, in the earth's atmosphere, because once we pass from this physical world, we go over there, we rest a little bit, and we get ready to come back again. We might have already read books like No Solar, for instance, and all the other ones that tell us about the spiritual colonies that exist around our planet, which are also learning posts for us before we come back. So, what we sometimes don't realize is that the greatest number of spirits on earth is actually not incarnate right now. They are in the spiritual plane around earth, waiting for an opportunity to come back and learn as well, and learn over there, right? So, while that's happening, in these difficult moments, something is going to always happen, right? The first piece is we're going to have some what we call elevated spirits. Spirits who are really learning their lessons really well, and they are going to come back to earth, and because they are really good students, they are going to help us raise our abilities, right? We have oftentimes communications from the incredible spirits. We have messages and books and so forth. We know that they're there, they're counseling us and making good choices. Then there's what I'm calling, for lack of a better word, developing spirits. That's sort of like us, right? Who are keeping pace. We are making our mistakes. We're not at that level, but we are progressing. As illustrated by my squiggly line over there, as you can see, right? So this is us. We're trying to kind of keep par with the evolution of the planet, because the planet itself also has to evolve, right? The classroom has to evolve together. Students in third grade end the year better than they started. The whole class has to grow. The whole planet has to evolve. And then there's also a third group of spirits, which I'm going to call spirits on the bubble, right? Who are perhaps struggling to keep pace with the progress that is required for us all to move forward. These are the spirits who are not doing as well as they should be, as we should be, right? And the challenge here, you have understood this already, is when the number of those spirits becomes too great, it starts to make it harder for us developing spirits to keep working, because it just disrupts us, right? And even though the elevated spirits are coming in and helping us, there's obviously a smaller number of them than of us, right? And they require extra help. So that normally it will work this way. And so our benefactors would make sure that at any point in time, we're not being overwhelmed by spirits who are on the bubble, who are incarnate on earth at the same time. Much the same way that you don't put struggling students all in one classroom at the same time. You have to find a good mix. You have to balance things up. However, if they're not making progress, they might need additional help. They might need to go to a different classroom where they get additional help, because they're not moving forward and they're holding other people back. If that is the case, that becomes an interesting conundrum. When will that happen? How's that happen? What's happening right now? Many of these students, the spirits on the bubble, have already been told, this is your last chance here on this classroom, on this planet, to keep up with the progress. If you are not going to be able to keep up with the moral progress that is required for the planet to evolve, we might need to take you to a different classroom where you will work at a slower pace. And what's going to happen is you will be the most advanced students in the new classroom, and you will help those who are even further behind you, because that way you will learn how it is to be ahead and be held back by people who are not as interested as you. This has already happened on earth in many different ways before in our history, but this moment is the moment where many spirits are being told, this is your last incarnation for us to see if you can stay on the average level of evolution that we have. If you cannot, you are going to be exiled, which is a strong word. You're going to be taken to a different place and planet where you'll be able to do this. As I mentioned before, this has happened to us in a roundabout way, where we have received, earlier in our historical evolutions, spirits who are more evolved than our average here to help us develop. And at the same time, they've learned how it is to have people who are a little behind. So many of our great civilizations of the past, for instance, were caused by an influx of spiritual migration. Look at us talking about these topics, right? Who have helped us, and then once they caught up again and they understood, morally speaking, what was needed, they're able to return to their classroom because they have received the tutoring, the extra opportunity that they need to move forward. That is already confusing enough, because what we are seeing now is we're getting an influx of these spirits on the bubble all of a sudden, because this is our last chance. So there's more of them incarnating right now in this past years, this past decades than before, which also helps us understand how we who are still developing, along with people who are still in the bubble, are creating this atmosphere that is not always as morally advanced as it should be. And hence the world is the way it is. But to help us out, we can also count not just on the elevated spirits here, we're also getting a batch, let's say, of volunteer migrant spirits who are from different places and are volunteering to come here and help us lift and change the way we do things. Because they have no history with this planet, they are not bound to our histories and traditions. How we've done things in the past are not as important for them because that's not how they've done things in the past. So it's only normal that many of them are going to challenge the way we do things. Our institutions, our cultures, our perspectives, we are seeing that. And we have noticed, for instance, in a wonderful work called Planetary Transition, in 2 more books by Manuel Filomeno de Miranda, that many of the spirits have already begun to incarnate on Earth as early as the late 1970s. So it's been happening for a while. All of that leads us to understand a little bit why our culture and our collective right now is really struggling in terms of ideas, cultures, and concepts, because we have us who are struggling to make sense of things, right? And I'm putting myself on the developing spirits. I'm hopeful. I am labeling myself as a developing spirit. I could very well be a spirit in the bubble, right? But we have us trying to make things right. We have folks who are not as interested in making things right, pulling it the other way. And then we have a third group, which is not a group that is homogeneous by nature, who has a different perspective on how things should do, and they don't necessarily operate the way we do. So we have a mix of things. We have 4 different ways of thinking about things happening at the same time. So it's no surprise that we're seeing this dynamic environment out there where there's all different kinds of tensions in terms of concepts, ideas, philosophies, because that's what is needed for us to move forward. To learn to be outside of ourselves and reconsider new ways of thinking. That's why we say that we are witnessing a spiritual revolution. Cultures, habits, priorities, values, everything is up for grabs. Everything is being reevaluated. And it's also understandable that those of us who have been in this planet for a while, have been in this class for a while, and have done things in a certain way, are reluctant to change. Because we always did things this way, we always thought about it this way. But now, with all that different perspective, we are being challenged to reconsider and say, is this really the best way of doing things? The way that we have always done? Is it really the best way to treat people the way that we have always treated them? So that is taking place right now, and it's a really interesting phenomena. But we're not just witnessing, we're part of it. We're also called to make a difference in this. And that is a key understanding that we can bring to our lives, because it's not enough to withdraw ourselves from the bonkers world out there and just feel like we're going to be okay. We have to give something back. As we also have read in the Spirit's book, in that wonderful question in 132, the meaning of life is to evolve, is to grow. But we also have to give back to the creation. We also have to help others grow. So we have a part to play in the middle of this craziness, so social craziness that is out there. And what is that? Well, one thing that we can do is ask ourselves, when is it going to get better, right? How long is it going to last for? Well, good news, in a couple of reincarnations. You're like, what? Hold on a second. I don't have that time. Yes, you do. Yes, you do. But think here with me. If we are incarnating a lot of those spirits on the bubble to give them a last chance to see whether they're going to stay in this classroom or they're going to lose another classroom, that's a lifetime of them. So that's at least like 67 years. But they don't all reincarnate at once, right? Not all babies are born on January 1st, right? In the same year. It happens slowly. So if you add another 20 years there, right? and then 20 years before that, and 20 years after that, so that in a period of 40 years, you have all these people being born, being reincarnated. You add that to the 70, you're talking about 100, 110, 120 years. The good news is that if the spirits have already been incarnating since the late 1970s and 1980s, that means that has already been happening for about 40 years. So we probably have another 60, 70, 80 years before things start to really improve. So that's really good news, because in the history of humanity, changes that happen in 100 years are really fast, right? The bad news for us who are incarnate is, I hate to break it to you, we're likely not to see a much improved Earth in our lifetimes, unless you're really young. Then you are going to get, towards your later years, you are going to get the perception of a better world. But hey, that's another good news. We get to come back. So in our next reincarnation, if we're still around, and I'm hopefully that all of us will be, we are going to enjoy a planet who's going to be on the up and up. And that's going to be amazing. Until then, we have work to do. We have to help this, because the more we help, the more we benefit from it, not only here, but later on. And what is it that we can do? So what do we do? Well, first thing is we hold hope in our hearts, because we understand the way things are. And by understanding, we understand that there is God in control, and our spiritual benefactors, our mentors and guides are working actively every single day to not only support us, but support those around us. Which means things are going to be okay. We have to remember that, because now that we understand the mechanism that these spirits have to reincarnate and have their last chance, and then with the new influx of spirits, both here from Earth and from a different classroom that's coming to foreign students that are joining this classroom, we are going to make this a better school. It's a matter of time. Until then, we just have to understand and hold hope in our hearts, because we are sorely lacking hope out there in the world. People are forgetting about spiritual values. They think that only the physical body is the reality. And when that happens, I can understand why you be so sad and so hopeless and so apathetic. But when we have the chance and the opportunity to be reminded that we are spiritual beings who are reincarnating, going through a process, it becomes easier to deal with all these challenges. And what else can we do? Well, we've got to be that change that we want to see, as Gandhi would say. We've got to go back and not do anything that we don't know. We just go back to the things that we do know. We go back to the message of the Christ 2,000 years ago that's teaching us how to behave better. He came to show us that life goes on after the physical body. He was resurrected. Nobody else in our history has done that. He came to show that the end of the physical world is not the end of us. And that during our process here, even though the fact that the world might be tough and treat us badly or poorly, we can be helpful and happy in the process, because that's what he was when he was here. So even if the world is tough for us, we can act like him by having joy in our lives, reminding ourselves our spirituality and that we are going to survive all of this, and help the world move forward with our kindness. So let's go back to those values. Let's go back to that way of behaving that he has shown us 2,000 years ago, and that we have now the pleasure of being reminded of by our good spirits that continue to share with us these messages of hope on a daily basis, through the books that we read, through the messages we receive, through the intuition that we get, through the beautiful feelings we feel during prayer when we connect with the divine. All of those are reminders that we are going to outlast all of these changes. But we need to think differently, and that's why I bring this different picture of Jesus, which is a portrait by the artist Akini when she was really young, I think 9 years old, when she wrote that. It's called Prince of Peace. I say that because that's not always the image that we have of Christ, physically speaking. The image of Christ does not really matter. But I wanted to put a different image because I think that it's time for us to go back and reevaluate what our understanding of the teachings of the Christ were. Because what we have been handed down from our parents, from our society, from our collectives, perhaps is not as accurate as it could be. Jesus is not about a religion. It's not about a church. It's not about specific habits or a day of the week. It is about real life application of these spiritual concepts in our lives every single day. It's about knowing in our hearts that our celestial Father and Mother loves us. It is about knowing that all of us are siblings, spiritually speaking, and all of us are progressing, and all of us will have as many lifetimes as we need to get there, and that everything is going to be okay. So even in these difficult moments out there, even when things are really going bonkers out in the world, make sure that you take a moment to recenter yourself and remind yourself that you as a mortal spirit are here in this time and place to help the world move forward in this important time of our spiritual evolution, where we are going to make this transition from a world that is not working out so great to a world that's going to be way better in generations to come. And what great honor it is to be together in this understanding that we can make a difference. And so we hope that by reflecting a little bit about this, you have some of the furnishings to keep with you when you feel attacked by hopelessness, when you feel a little bit down for the world out there because there's so many things going on. Go back to what you know. And remember that you're going to be okay. We're going to be okay. And that we can make a difference every single day by our actions, by remaining steadfast to the beautiful message of love and spiritual resilience that the Christ has left us with. So we hope this is some food for thought. I'll be glad to talk with folks if you have different opinions or questions later on. But for now, I'm going to invite you to join me in a brief meditation so that we can then be followed by passes.